Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to my very first YouTube video. On this channel I want to do a lot of things. I want to talk about books, I want to talk about movies and TV shows, but I think for my first video what I want to focus on is my reading throughout 2024. So I'll talk about all of the books I've read, mostly in order, and I'll talk about my favorites, my least favorites, and give some recommendations based on all of those things. My reading in 2024 was all over the place. I read a lot of big books, small books, and everything in between. And I decided to kind of go back to some of the things that I feel like I should have read when I was younger. I was a reader when I was younger, but I didn't hit all of the classic series that formed a lot of people's youth, so I tried to revisit those. So one of the first things I read in 2024 was the entire Chronicles of Narnia series. Okay, so there's a Chronicles of Narnia. All right, so I'll go through all of those and I'll talk about which ones were my favorite, how I thought all of them kind of went. I did actually go in order of 1 through 7. A lot of people online tell you to go a different way, but I just did that. Some people say, oh, you need to start with the order that they were written in, so it would be Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, etc. But I did start with Magician's Nephew, even though that was not the first one written, and I had a lot of fun with that one. This is actually the only one I had previously read, but I really enjoy it. I think it adds a lot into the lore of Narnia, so you're getting to learn about creation of Narnia. C.S. Lewis talks a lot about that, and you get some background into a lot of the characters that you already know throughout the other books. And then I did go into The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is a lot of people's favorite. I enjoyed that one a lot as well. I do feel like I may have enjoyed it more if I hadn't already seen the movies and known that story really well, but it didn't add a lot of excitement because I'm pretty familiar with that one. I did The Horse and His Boy, which a lot of people aren't as big a fan of, but actually I thought this was one of my top books because it added a lot into the series as well. So when we talk about The Horse and His Boy, you're not just in Narnia and you're not following your main characters, the Pevensies. You're following a different character that you don't know a lot about at the start, and it's kind of his journey to Narnia, and you do get to interact with some of those original characters from the story as well. Then I did Prince Caspian. This is one of my lesser favorites. It's still a great book, but I don't think that it's one of my tops. It has some really fun moments, some good battles, and you get to see a lot of those original characters from Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that you know and love. Then Voyage of the Dawn Treader. A lot of fun. This is definitely an adventurous book. There's a lot of traveling in it. You're going on boat. There's dragon. There's like battles, things like that are a really good time. Also not one of my tops. A couple of my favorites were the last two books, actually. So these are two that I really didn't know much about. I hadn't seen any exposure because I hadn't seen any movie adaptations of them, but I really enjoyed reading them for the first time. So The Silver Chair, I think this may actually be my top book in the Narnia series. There's a lot of fun things that happen in this. There's some twists and turns. You're getting some of your familiar characters, but you're also adding a lot of new people. And it has a lot of fun things that happen as well as some big drama and some twists. And then The Last Battle. I may do a whole separate video about Narnia because I think that there's a pretty small percentage of people my age that have actually read through the entire Narnia series and they really don't understand where Narnia goes. I think that Narnia is an awesome series and the ending really shocked me. I had no idea that this is the ending that was going to happen. And I think that people need to read this to understand everyone else's childhood trauma that has read this. And they need to understand it's not just a kid's tale. Things grow up and it becomes pretty mature at the end there. But that was my first kind of read for 2024 was the entire Narnia series, book 1 through 7. On this channel, you're always going to see me highlight all the fun little things I make from my bookshelf. So one of those is bookends. And here we have my Narnia bookend. I've got right here, it doesn't even end at the Narnia book, so you can add some other ones on there. But there's the silhouette of Aslan, the Pevensies, Mr. Tumnus, and then the light post that is integral to the Narnia story. So pretty cool. If you're interested in all the fun little things that I 3D print here for bookmarks and bookends, maybe I'll end up including some of those down in the links below these videos. The next book I read in 2024 was Stardust by Neil Gaiman. I had never read this before or any of his other works, but I really enjoyed the movie when I was younger. It had a lot of great actors in it. The story is a lot of fun. It's very whimsical. And I really just think that this story takes you to a lot of different places very quickly, and it does it in a really artful way, in a way that just kind of makes you feel good and have a really fun time. So that was one of my top reads. I actually gave that one 5 stars because I thought it was a lot of fun to read through. Next up, I read one of the Witcher books, The Time of Contempt. So this is book 2 technically, but if you watch any other booktubers or book talkers, they'll tell you do not read these in the order that they say on the books, because this is more like number 4. There are some collections of short stories, like The Last Wish, and you should really read in that order, because if you just start at The Blood of Elves, you're not really going to get the full picture. You're not going to have the story of how Geralt finds Ciri, anything like that. I love The Witcher. I love the video games. I actually really enjoy the show, and I like a lot of the books, but this was actually one of my least favorite books of the year. The Time of Contempt, I felt like it was a little bit more of a slower burn. Not a whole lot happened in it. And you can see my fun 3D printed Witcher bookmark there. I didn't design that one. That's actually on Thingiverse, but I might link it down below. I had some good times with this one, but it just took me a while to get through, and it didn't really grab me as much as some of the other books I read this year. Next up, I have a series I'm really excited about. I was really jumping around series to series because I'm trying to read a lot of different things and kind of just expand my reading and what I'm really getting into. But these books I really had to read back to back because they were so much fun. They were fast paced and a great time. If you're on BookTube or Book Talk, you probably recognize these. It's the Red Rising series. You will not recognize these awesome bookmarks that I 3D printed. I'm really happy about those. They turned out great with the books, but I have a fun time decorating all of my books with those. I'll talk about these a little bit, but I'm probably going to do a whole separate video about the Red Rising series. Book 1 was a ton of fun. This was a 5-star read for me. I loved it. I thought it was great. A lot of people compare it to Hunger Games, and I totally get that. It has a lot of similar aspects in storyline, but I don't think it's a ripoff. I don't think that it is less because it has a lot of those same themes. It has a lot of extra things that it adds, and I think that the character work is fantastic. Pierce Brown, the author, does an amazing job of connecting you to the characters extremely quickly. He's also ruthless, like George R.R. Martin, and he will kill people off that will leave you feeling like your world is destroyed as you read it. So Red Rising is a fantastic start for that series, and it just keeps getting better from there. Golden Sun ramps things up. So whereas book 1 is always compared to Hunger Games, this really expands the whole universe, and now you're an interplanetary warfare. It's a real space opera here where they're going on multiple planets, and there's spaceships and battle and these really futuristic technologies that are really fun to read about, and the characters just keep growing, developing, and then dying to make you feel terrible. So I won't give any spoilers, but fantastic. Morningstar, that is the finale of the original Red Rising trilogy, and it is just fantastic as well. So Morningstar does a lot of those same things that make the first 2 books great. So it expands the story and the lore. You have that amazing character development, and it just really rounds out this story arc fantastically, to where if you were only to read these 3 books, you'd have a fantastic time. Right now, as I'm ending 2024, I'm actually reading the start of the sequel series. So I am in Iron Gold, which I've been hesitant to do because I love the way that this original trilogy ends, but I am very excited to see what Pierce Brown does in the sequel series. So I will let you know as I continue to read those, how they turn out, and how they stack up to the original trilogy. The next series I read was His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. So you have book 1, The Golden Compass, you have The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass. It's an awesome trilogy, and I was really brought to this series by the show that's on Max, which is His Dark Materials. I thought it was a great show, really underrated. I've never really heard a lot of people talking about it, but I think it's a really awesome fantasy show. So it brought me here to read these to see how the books stack up, what kind of changes they made, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that it's actually a really faithful adaptation. I think that they obviously made some creative liberties, which you have to do no matter what when you're adapting books into a different form of media, but overall it was really true to the source material. They were a lot of fun. There's some really big things that happen in these The ideas are awesome, and I really love just the whole dynamic between kids and their demons, and even adults and their demons. But those are just some really fun interactions that you see throughout the books and the show. So if you haven't checked that out, either watch it on Max or check those books out. You have the original trilogy, and there's also a sequel trilogy that I'll talk about later, but definitely worth giving it a read. Next, I have The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I didn't read this whole thing. I just read book 1 in here because it's the ultimate Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But book 1's a lot of fun. Douglas Adams has some great absurdist humor. So if you're a fan of sci-fi or absurdist humor in general, you'll probably really enjoy this. There's some wacky characters. You never know where the story's going to go. There's just ridiculous things happen, and it really has some fun twists and turns. So give that a look as well, and you'll really enjoy it. Next up, I have Mistborn, book 1 and 2. So we have The Final Empire and The Well of Ascension. This is not my first Brandon Sanderson book. I actually read Warbreaker last year, but these were my first Mistborn books, and I really loved these. Everyone has recommended, like, oh, if you're going to start Brandon Sanderson or the Cosmere, Mistborn's a great place to start. I also think Warbreaker was a great place for me to start as well. It's a lot of fun. It's a standalone novel, but the first 2 books in this trilogy are also a fantastic time. You can see my awesome bookmarks here, some of the different metals in Mistborn that have different allomantic powers. But I think that Kelsier is a ton of fun in the first book, and Vin is a fantastic character, just her growth throughout. There's some awesome twists and turns. Everyone talks about the Sanderlanche, where the last 100 books or 100 pages has some big old twists and fun things that happen. And I've totally seen that throughout his books, that those last 100 pages have some epic twists, turns, battles, and really keeps you on the edge of your seat. So I'm really excited to finish out this trilogy early in 2025 and continue on with some of his other books. Like I may be getting into the Stormlight Archive or checking out some other standalones by him as well. Next up, I have a series I am really excited about, and that is The Chronicles of Prydain. I read these all the way through book 1 through 5, as well as a sequel book that's just some kind of short stories combined together. But this starts with the Book of 3. It's a really fun start. They start off for a really young audience, kind of like how Harry Potter starts with book 1, Sorcerer's Stone, and then it matures. Book 2, you may recognize the name, The Black Cauldron. There was an older Disney movie, The Black Cauldron, that is actually based off of the Chronicles of Prydain, and it kind of spans through book 1 and 2, but it is a pretty poor adaptation as far as being true to the source material, so it changed a lot of things. If you read these, it's going to be completely fresh, completely new. You're not going to have anything spoiled. You'll recognize some of the characters' names, things like that, but you're going to have a really good time. Book 3 is fun. It's called The Castle of Lear. This is one of the more boring books in the series. I wouldn't even call it boring, but it's just not one of the best ones. You're furthering along the main character's growth. You're meeting some new people and doing some fun things, but nothing too special. Book 4 and 5 were actually my favorites of the series. So number 4 is Taran Wanderer. Okay, that's a really good one. The main character, Taran, goes on a journey, kind of a self-discovery, trying to find out where he comes from, where he fits into the world. He learns a lot of great lessons along the way. So this is one that's just a lot of rich character development. It's a lot of fun. You meet some wacky people. It also has some really heart-wrenching moments in it that you're going to have a good time with. The last book, The High King, is the culmination of the Chronicles of Prydain. Okay, The High King is really great. It definitely is matured. You're going to have some character deaths that you wouldn't expect. You're going to have some big battles, some culmination of a lot of these plot lines, and it's just a really fun book overall. None of these are very big. You can finish all of them in a day or two without much struggle because they're pretty small books. And then you can see here my harp bookmark. That is for Fluder Flam, because a flam never falters, of course. If you know the books, you know. But definitely check those out. I think they're pretty underrated in today's day and age. And so whether you're an adult or you have some kids, this is a great series that you really should check out. There is also The Foundling and Other Tales of Prydain. It's also pretty fun. It's just some short stories that are in that universe. It doesn't have that regular feel of normal storyline and a plot. There are some fun stories in here that add into the experience. So if you've read The Chronicles of Prydain and you love those stories, definitely give that a read as well. Next, I continued Philip Pullman's series through His Dark Materials. So outside of the original trilogy, he has a sequel series called The Book of Dust. There is Book 1, La Belle Sauvage, and then there is The Secret Commonwealth. And Book 3 is supposed to be coming out sometime in the next year, which I'm really excited for. I have never talked to anyone else that has read these books or knows about them, and I would highly recommend that you check them out, especially if you have read the original His Dark Materials trilogy. Book 1, especially, La Belle Sauvage, I think was a lot of fun. You follow young Malcolm Polstead. This is actually when Lyra is a baby, and it's kind of how she came to Jordan College and all these things that happen that kind of highlight why she's special. But there's some awesome moments in it, and the antagonist in it, he is just a lot of fun. Well, I shouldn't even say he's fun. He's kind of creepy in it. They do a good job of making him menacing, and the way he's kind of chasing after our protagonists in it, but a really good time. The Secret Commonwealth jumps forward, so it's actually going to be after His Dark Materials, but it's still part of that sequel series. And Malcolm Polstead is now older. He's like middle-aged. Lyra is in her young to mid-20s. And it's kind of continuing that story after His Dark Materials and where she's going, and now she is kind of having more interaction with Malcolm Polstead from the original La Belle Sauvage. It's fun, but I think that the La Belle Sauvage is more fun. I think that one is a 5-star read. So check those out and have a good time. After I read those two, I did a couple of the novellas on audiobook. So I did Lyra's Oxford and Once Upon a Time in the North. Lyra's Oxford was all right. It was fun. It added a few things into that story. But Once Upon a Time in the North, I actually enjoyed quite a bit. That follows Lee Scoresby and Yorick Burnison, and it's how those two meet, and they have kind of almost like a Wild West adventure where there's some shootouts and gunslingers and things like that. So that's worth checking out as well. And it's a really quick, easy read or an easy listen if you're on Audible or Spotify, anything like that. Next up, I had another younger read. I went into The Neverending Story by Michael Ende, or Ende, however you say that. And I had actually seen a cult classic movie. It's a bit older, and it's like animatronics and some interesting practical effects. And everyone really likes that has seen it when they were younger. And I enjoyed it as well. But what I was really pleasantly surprised by is how much farther the book goes than the movie. I get to the point where the plot in the movie kind of ends and it wraps up, and I'm like, wow, there must be wrapping things up. And I'm like halfway through. It continues on. It has a lot of other fun lessons and quirky adventures that happen. And so I would recommend definitely check this out, even if you've seen the movie, because you're going to have a lot of things added in that you have no idea about, and you're really in for a ride as well. And then check out my awesome 3D printed bookmarker of Arin. Yeah. Next, I went into some more adult fantasy, and I went to Anthony Ryan's Raven's Blade series. So his original Raven's Shadow trilogy is what really got me into more adult fantasy. There's some darker themes in it, some brutal fighting and battle sequences, and I loved that series. Specifically, I loved Bloodsong. I think that book 3 was pretty weak in that trilogy, but I was really excited to revisit this because he continues on with the main character, Vaylin Al-Sorna, when you get to The Wolf's Call, and then he continues that on in The Black Song. And I think that these were much more appropriate additions to Vaylin's story than the original ending of that trilogy. So I was glad that he revisited that character, and then we got to spend more time with them. I think these are a lot of fun. They have some awesome things that happen. The battles that Anthony Ryan describes are amazing, and I really look forward to, if he continues Vaylin's story, and also to checking out some of his other series, like The Waking Fire and the Draconis Memoria, and then the series that has, was it The Pariah and The Traitor and The Martyr. I think he's just an excellent writer, and I would really love to check out some of his other works. Next one, I went to The Princess Bride. I think that this is a story that most people have at least heard of. The movie is fantastic. The book is extremely close to the movie. It's a very short read. It's a lot of fun. So it just felt very nostalgic to read it. And I enjoyed it the whole way through, and I finished it within a day and had a great time. After The Princess Bride, I checked out Bridge to Terabithia. I had seen the movie when I was younger. I really didn't remember it that well. I just know it was kind of a heart-wrenching story. So I read that real quickly as well. It took me just a couple days. And it's a fun book, and it's also a very sad book, but it's definitely worth reading. So I'd recommend checking that out if you never got to it when you were younger. Next up, back to this big, thick book. I read the second one in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, which is The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. It still has a lot of those fun, quirky things and that absurdist humor from Douglas Adams, but I don't think it really has that same feel as the first book. It wasn't quite captured there for me, or maybe I just wasn't in the zone when I was reading this, so I didn't enjoy it quite as much. This one I only gave 3 stars out of 5. I do think that the writing style is a lot of fun and there's some awesome things that happen, so it's still worth checking out, and I will continue to read this and finish out the entire Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. Next, I read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This is a really fun one. My fiance was actually reading this and she was really enjoying it, and she's like, all right, you got to read this. So I finished it within just a couple days, and I think it was a great read. The only thing that I think brought it down a little bit for me is that it reminded me a lot of Terran Wanderer from the Chronicles of Prydain. Very similar kind of themes, that journey of kind of self-discovery and the character going off and doing all these odd jobs and learning things along the way. But I felt like Terran Wanderer actually did it better. It was more fun. You have a lot of great lessons, and it just kind of pulled my heartstrings a little bit more than The Alchemist. So as much as I enjoyed The Alchemist, I gave it 4 stars out of 5. Next, I read the Bartimaeus series, so book 1 through 4, and I always saw these when I was younger in Barnes & Noble, and I thought they looked like a lot of fun. The covers really grabbed me, but I never picked one up and bought it off the shelves, so I went ahead and read those this year, and I think they're a lot of fun. Bartimaeus is one cheeky genie who gets into some quirky adventures, always getting stuck in sticky situations. And I think it's fun that you have one of the main characters, Nathaniel, who is a magician, and then you have Bartimaeus, who you're like seeing things from his point of view, and he's like narrating things to you, and you're seeing it from his point of view, having lived thousands of years and having this fun, wacky personality, and getting up to all these crazy adventures as well. So that spans through your original Bartimaeus trilogy, and then there is a prequel book, which is The Ring of Solomon, which is also pretty fun to check out as well. So whether you're a younger reader or you're an adult and you just enjoy checking out some of those mid-grade or young adult fantasy series, I'd recommend checking it out as well. Next up, I revisited the Witcher series. I got to The Baptism of Fire. You can see my fun 3D printed Witcher bookmark there. This was actually so far my favorite book in the Witcher series. I think it's a lot of fun. It has some great things that happen. I think there's some good character development, some great adventure and action. The only thing that kept making me laugh is they kept saying the name of the book in it, Baptism of Fire. So there'd be several times like, this is our baptism of fire, or oh, we have to go through a baptism of fire to get there. And every time I read it, I was like, I get it. Nice. But very fun read, and I am excited to continue the series and to finish it out. Next up was one of my top reads of the year, which was actually The Silmarillion. I was really resistant to read this. I was very intimidated. I saw a lot of book talkers and booktubers that talked about how difficult of a read this was, and that it was completely different from Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, which I read and loved. And so I was just worried that I would read this and I would struggle too much and I wouldn't have a great time. So I went into it and I honestly raced through it. I had a great time. I thought it was entertaining. It added so much to the lore. And I can totally see where a lot of people might struggle with this. I think the biggest thing is that they introduce so many different characters and character names. So not only do you have tons of characters over thousands of years in Middle-earth, but you also have potentially multiple names for each character. So there's names that they're called among the elves and the dwarves and the men, and they're going to reference different names for that person where you are in the story. So it can become very confusing, especially if you have trouble memorizing those names. If you don't have trouble with those names, you'll probably be okay. Even if you do have trouble with them, I recommend check out The Silmarillion. It adds so much into J.R.R. Tolkien's works, developing Middle-earth and all of the lore behind that, and it's a lot of fun. And then you can see I've got the Sting bookmark there, which I'll get a little clip of me turning off the lights because it does glow blue, lower accurate. My last read of the year was The Sands of Nisa by M.L. Foreman. I had read a lot of these other books in the Adventurers Wanted series when I was younger, and I was looking for just something quick and easy for an audiobook while I was driving around. So I was like, oh, let me continue that series. I never finished it. And while it's fun and I can see where I was enjoying it when I was younger, I don't think this holds up quite as well as a lot of the other middle grade or YA fantasy series out there. I think the writing is a little more rudimentary. The character development's not super great. Honestly, his main character becomes very overpowered very quickly, and he's just not a very relatable person. It's still fun. The adventures are great. You're going to have some quirky things that happen, but I just think that this is probably one of my bottom reads of the year. I'm looking at around 3 stars. I'm generous. I never give really terrible ratings to anything, and I'll continue it and finish it out. There's just one more book in the series, and they're quick, easy reads as well. Well, that is all of the books that I read throughout all of 2024. I hope you have enjoyed this video. I plan to do a lot more. I'll do book reviews. I'll talk about some reading wrap-ups, some book recommendations for things that I've really enjoyed. But I do want to reveal which of those books was my #1 read of 2024. And that book was Golden Son, book 2 in the Red Rising series. I just think that this book had so many amazing things that happened to it. The character development is fantastic. I think Pierce Brown does characters like no one else. He creates these very imperfect characters, tons of flaws, but you just love them, and then he will absolutely destroy you when he kills those characters. I won't say who he kills. There's lots of characters you will love, so that doesn't spoil anything. But if you love great world building, character building, and amazing plots to your books, check out the Red Rising series. Make sure you get to book 2, Golden Son, and then let me know if this absolutely destroyed you like it did to me. Thank you all. I look forward to making more videos. Go ahead and comment some of your favorite reads from 2024 here, and let me know what your recommendations are for me to read in 2025.